Hello, hello, hello. Let's wait for everybody to join the webinar. Hello and welcome. Super, super happy, and the whole team is so thrilled to see that there are so many of you joining us today. And yeah, welcome to yet another hands-on workshop with the BindPlane team. Um, we have a super cool interactive demo prepared for you today, and Denton is super eager to jump in there. And yeah, let's just give it another minute or so for everybody to join in. And yeah, um, as for an intro, I'll be your host for today. I'm Adnan, and I'm the head of DevRel here at BindPlane. And super stoked to share that with me today. We have Denton and Ryan. And yeah, let's just get the introductions. And yeah, handing over the mic to Denton first. Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. Hey, y'all. Denton Kreitz here. I'll be the sales engineer for the day, running through the demo and the hands-on workshop, based here in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And yeah, really excited to be here and share this with you all today.
Hey everyone, I'm Ryan Goins, a lead product here at BindPlane. Really excited for the workshop today, and also just to hear any of your feedback on BindPlane and the way BindPlane works with SecOps. So if you're not in our BindPlane community Slack, certainly join that. You can there's a link right on our website, and feel free to just DM me anytime in Slack with your feedback or thoughts. Would love to hear them. Jump in, some one-on-one sessions with you. So yeah, thanks for joining us. Excited to get started here.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, we've had a pretty cool growth for the community itself, for the Slack community, and we've had so much cool feedback on BindPlane, and specifically Ryan. He really loves to hear what you guys are saying. So feel free to jump in there. And yeah, with I think we have most of our attendees present. And yeah, we can kick it off with the agenda for today. So just a brief outline of what we're going to be talking about for the rough 30 minutes or so. We're going to first, of course, introduce BindPlane and all the core features, just so we have a refresher on that. Then, of course, we're going to do a short little walkthrough around the BindPlane architecture. We have a little overview diagram that we've painted just to get a nice picture of how everything works together. We'll also discuss telemetry pipelines, and of course, we'll discuss the All-Band protocol because it's really key here to the inner workings of BindPlane. Then, of course, the bread and butter of the workshop, why everybody is here, is Denton, and he'll walk you through a hands-on demo with using BindPlane and integrating with Google SecOps. And then, of course, at the end, we'll do some Q&A. So we're going to open up the floor for questions. If you have any questions along the way, so whilst we're discussing during the demo, feel free to drop them in the chat here. Both myself and Ryan, we're going to do our best to answer right away. But also we can just, you can cut us off and we can discuss your questions along the way as well. So don't feel as if you have to wait until the end. Feel free to ask away right away. Yeah. Cool. Now, just a short refresher for the next minute or two. What is BindPlane? So in short, it's a OpenTelemetry native telemetry pipeline. What does that mean? So it means that the core functionality is to provide a unified platform to monitor and manage your telemetry data. So you can basically collect your telemetry data and send it to whichever destination you want. This makes it super smooth and easy to collect telemetry data, process it, and then export it because it's built on vendor-agnostic OpenTelemetry standards. And then this makes it, again, super easy to manage fleets of tons of collectors, which means that it's much easier to manage your telemetry infrastructure at scale. And then, of course, this all boils down to cost efficiency. Just because you get this flexibility and ease of use just makes it so much simpler to create processors, to reduce the amount of data that you're essentially exporting to your observability backend. And now the cool part, the architecture. So of course, this represents BindPlane Cloud with Google SecOps, just because Denton will demo this specifically today. But just so you do know, it doesn't matter. BindPlane, the self-hosted or on-prem BindPlane works exactly the same. The architecture is exactly the same. So there's no difference in features or functionality whatsoever. And specifically for this sample, there's one really important key thing to take away, and that's how the key components work together. We have the collectors, which is this central portion where you see the customer network. The collectors are responsible for gathering all of the telemetry data and then, of course, exporting it to, in this case, Google SecOps. And then we have the second part is the plane. So the plane here, BindPlane, is the central control plane that manages and monitors all of your collectors. And then the way they communicate is through the op-amp protocol. And you can see that by looking at the little dotted line between the collectors and BindPlane Cloud. Now, the point of all of this is basically that BindPlane helps you manage this telemetry throughput, making it super easy to manage and configure multiple collectors. And what does that even mean, manage collectors? Because of this op-amp protocol, you can basically push configurations from the plane to your collectors by not touching the collector specifically. The magical part here is because the BindPlane distro for OpenTelemetry collector is the first distro that has op-amp built in. So you don't really have to configure it yourself. You just run a collector that can communicate with BindPlane automatically. This op-amp protocol is designed by the OpenTelemetry team. So it basically stands for Open Agent Management Protocol. And it's specifically designed for managing fleets of collectors. And the key part here to also note is that it's the collector itself, so the BDOT collector itself, the BindPlane collector, that initiates the op-amp connection with BindPlane, the control plane. So telemetry never flows through BindPlane specifically. BindPlane just shows you a preview of the telemetry that's flowing through your network and your collectors. So the data never ends up in BindPlane. So if you have any data restrictions or concerns in that sense, the telemetry always stays in your network. And with that little refresher, we can take a second to look and see if we have any questions. If not, open up the Q&A. We do.
Hey, no, we got a question saying they
Mhm.
some folks can't see the screen share.
Okay. Let me move back and try resharing in a second. Okay, get that, get that. Okay. Try sharing once again.
Yeah.
How about now?
Do folks mind just raising your hand if you can see the screen share? Okay, awesome. All right, looks like we're good. Thanks, everyone.
Gotcha. Yeah, I hope we didn't get cut off with the screen share whilst I was talking. That would have sucked. But cool. Yeah. Let's jump back into the Q&A and see if we have any questions. So did we have any questions for the intro part?
There's a few questions, but I'm answering them via chat. So I think we can jump into the demo.
Wonderful. Yeah, let's hand it over to Denton and yeah.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Adnan. So yeah, our plan today is to start from scratch and go from zero to getting data into SecOps. So we're going to spin up a brand new BindPlane Cloud instance. We're going to install the BindPlane collector on a Windows server that I have in my lab. And then we're gonna start sending Windows event logs, at least Windows event logs, over to SecOps and go through the various steps needed to get that pipeline up and running. Depending on how much time we have, we can get into some extra sort of bonus content for manipulating that data, doing some filtering and so forth. But yeah, we'll see where we get, and we've got plenty planned. So yeah, I'd say let's dig in. So you want to stop sharing? I'll start sharing. Perfect. Let's do this. Awesome. Get you guys out of the way. All right. So the first part is we're going to go to app.bindplane.com. Technically, we were already there, but yeah, app.bindplane.com. Feel free to follow along while we're doing it, or you can sign up at any point after the fact. We're going to sign up for a brand new account, and I'm going to put in my email address. So Denton, and we'll do a webinar at observiq.com. Give it a nice strong password and we'll continue. Awesome. I'm going to go over to my email off screen. I just got my verification email. I'm going to get my, email's verified. I go back to my login. And one more time, Denton Plus webinar at observiq.com. Password. Let me type that again. And we're in. Perfect. We're going to give ourselves an organization name. We're just going to keep it simple and call it webinar. And accept the EULA and get started. So just that quick, we're up and running within our cloud SaaS Bindplane instance. Everything is ready to rock and roll. As you would expect, there's nothing in here. No agents installed, no configuration set up, and so forth. So the first thing we're going to want to do is actually get some, in this case, we're going to get one agent running on our Windows server. This could also be a Linux server, Mac endpoints, what have you, Kubernetes. We many different platforms supported, but again, for this demo, we're going to focus on Windows. So I'm going to install my first agent. Here's the various platforms we were just talking about. I'm going to select Windows and hit next. I'm going to zoom in here a bit. Feel free to comment in the chat if at any point the screen's hard to read or whatever. Just let Adnan and Ryan know. They'll let me know to zoom in. But I'll try to keep things nice and large so we can all see it. Cool. So this one line executable is what's going to allow us to install that agent on the Windows server. It's a simple MSI file, nice and easy installation here. The most important parts to call out are the op-amp endpoint and the op-amp secret. Adnan was talking about, op-amp is the protocol we're using between the collector and the Bindplane server. And so the collector needs to know where to reach the op-amp server, i.e. Bindplane, and what's the shared secret between the two so that they can authenticate and communicate with each other. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to pull my RDP session in over here. And I'm going to open up PowerShell, and I'm going to make sure that I'm running as administrator so that everything gets installed. I'm going to copy it one more time. Switch back over. All right, guys. Got way too many windows open. There we go. It's always fun when you're trying to copy and paste between an RDP session. Let me do this one more time. This will be the hardest part of the entire workshop. There we go. Perfect. So we pasted our command. We're going to execute it. And we're going to give it a second. And in roughly under 10 seconds, we should see that pop up here in our Bindplane instance. Again, just to call out we're installing this as a single command line, but we support any number of platforms for installing software, right? Your Puppets, your Chef, Ansible, SCCM, anything that's going to let you install this MSI file or the Linux package and provide these attributes, these parameters are going to be good to go. Perfect. Let me slide this guy back
I have
off.
a question. So we have a question that's probably related to this install of the agent.
Sure.
Does it require a proxy setup to install the Bindplane collector in Windows?
Nope. No proxy required. We can support environments where there is a proxy in play, but we do not require the proxy, or we do not require a proxy to be configured.
Nice,
Awesome.
nice. Yeah, cool.
Cool. So we've got our agent has checked in. Let's click back. Great. We've got our first agent up and running. But at the moment, it's not processing any data. So it's just sitting there waiting to be configured, waiting to have an OpenTelemetry configuration deployed to it. So let's hop over to our configuration page. We're going to create a brand new config. We're going to give it a name. We'll just call it Windows servers, right? So assume, again, we're going to only roll it out to one agent, but this same configuration could be rolled out to thousands of agents. So we'll say this is our sort of base Windows server config. And we're going to select Windows so that Bindplane is only showing us Windows-related resources. We'll hit next. And we're going to add our first source. And you can see we've got a ton of options here, many of which are super flexible, so they can be used, even though we have a certain list here, most of these like file, or when we get down to TCP and UDP, can be utilized with a lot of different systems, even if they're not already in the list. But for the sake of this demo, we're going to pick Windows Events. And we've got just a couple quick settings here to look at. We're going to select the default channels that we want to subscribe to and pull data out of. So system application security are the standards. We do support custom channels as well. And again, if time permitting, we'll dig into that, but we'll start with just the basics. And probably the most important checkbox in this setting, specifically for SecOps, is we're going to make sure we check the raw logs. I'll explain this more once we get some data flowing, but for now, we're going to go with all three of the primary channels, and we're going to make sure we're sending raw logs. And hit save. And that's it. We could add more sources, but we'll start with just these. And hit next. Now, we're going to start with sending these to what we call dev null. Which basically means we're going to be able to see data flowing, but we're not actually going to send it anywhere. And I think that's a really nice way of making sure your data is formatted the way you expect, make sure you've got all of the enrichment and so forth set up before you actually send it to your proper destination. But just to highlight again, we've got a number of different destinations that we could choose between. And we can send to multiple destinations at the same time. And again, eventually we're going to be selecting Google SecOps, but for now, we're going to do dev null. And we're going to give it a name. And we're going to save it. Perfect. Awesome. So we've got the beginnings of a data pipeline. We've got a source, we've got a destination, and we've got the ability to add some processing in the middle. At the moment, this is not attached to anything. So let's go ahead and attach it to the agent that we got set up. Awesome. So the agent's attached and it's ready to roll out. And let me roll this guy out. Now, before I forget, I'm going to show you guys something that we literally just released the other week, which is our V2 config. This is currently in beta. This is really exciting changes to how you can configure these data pipelines. If this were an existing pipeline that you wanted to make sure you saved and backed up, we would definitely recommend duplicating it to start. But given that we've got really nothing in here, this took us a second to create, I'm gonna live on the edge and no backup needed. So I'm gonna upgrade to V2. It's gonna tell me, are you sure you don't want to create a backup? I'm sure. I'm gonna upgrade. Awesome. So if you're already familiar with Bindplane, I think this is going to be a really exciting change for you. You're going to start to recognize some of the new improvements, you know, and we'll talk through some of those as we go. But the first couple things to point out right off the bat, now our logs, metrics, and traces pipelines are separated out. And then there's some more features that you'll see here in a second. So I'm going to roll this quick change out as well. Now, we've got some data flowing. I've just got a test script here off on the side on that Windows server that's pumping some Windows events into it. So if I open up this first processor node, we actually see some data coming from that Windows server. So this is great. And again, for somebody like myself who uses the product all the time, it's easy to sort of forget how valuable it is to be able to really quickly and easily come in here and get a sense of the data that's going through the pipeline. And I want to call out one of the points that Adnan made. The data is always flowing through the collectors, not through the Bindplane management console, but we are able to take small snapshots of the data, which is what we've done here, and show that to allow you to be able to see, okay, this is what the data looks like, this is how it's formatted. And then even more important, once we start getting into the processors, we'll see, okay, what's the data look like going out of the pipeline? One of the things I want to call out, when we set up that source for Windows event, we check that raw log option. And what that's doing is when we look at the body of our message, that entire XML is all within that body. So we have not, Bindplane has not parsed those logs. It's leaving the entire raw XML in the body of the message. And that's exactly what SecOps is expecting. So if you know, there's a couple key takeaways for this demo, one of which is the SecOps platform is expecting raw, unstructured data from Bindplane. And that's exactly what we've got here. Awesome. The second most important takeaway is there are a couple key attributes that we want to make sure that we're sending so that SecOps knows what to do with that data. And so we're going to do that by adding a particular processor. Again, similar to the sources and destinations, we've got a lot of options here, and we're not going to have the time to go through most of these during this call. If you sign up for your own account, feel free to play around and see all of the different ways you can manipulate the data. But the one we're most concerned with right now is the Google SecOps standardization. So we're going to select that. And what this does is make it very easy to set 3 key attributes that SecOps is typically looking for. Most importantly, the log type, but we can also set the namespace and the ingestion labels, which are ways to identify the data within SecOps. We see people using these for like identifying data that's coming from different teams, sometimes even different customers if you're working with multiple customers. You could also use ingestion labels for things like which data center the data is coming from. So both namespace and ingestion labels are optional. Log type, however, is not. And so we absolutely want to make sure that we tell SecOps exactly what kind of data we're sending it. We've got Google's got an entire list of supported log types. So I recommend taking a look at it and making sure you're using the proper log type. For us, we're sending Windows events. So we're going to use win EVT log, which is exactly what we've got here. I'm going to give it a namespace. I'm just going to call it webinar, right, to sort of identify and separate out this data as the webinar data. And maybe we'll give it an ingestion label called data center. And I'm in Ann Arbor, so we'll call this my Ann Arbor data center. And if I hit done here, again, the really nice thing about this snapshot and preview panel is it's going to show us exactly what this processor did, and we don't even need to roll those changes out to the collector, right? We immediately see, oh, okay, it's adding 3 new attributes to the data. It's adding one called Chronicle namespace, Chronicle log type. Again, that's the really important one we want to make sure we get. And then we can do multiple Chronicle ingestion labels, right? And this one's called data center, and we can give it a name, right? All 3 of these are going to be used by the SecOps destination that we're going to configure here in just a second. And it knows to look for those attributes and configure them. They're sort of special values compared to, we could have any number of other attributes here that would not be utilized by the destination. But because these are specifically named Chronicle underscore namespace log type and so forth, those are the ones it's going to pull out and use for those attributes, those parameters of the API call. Cool. We've got those set up. Let's hit save. We can roll this out now. We don't really need to, but yeah, we'll just push that change out to the collector. So at this point, we've got our Windows logs coming in. We've made sure we added those special attributes that are needed by the SecOps destination, but the data is still just going to dev null. So it's not actually going anywhere. Now that we're confident that the data looks the way we want it to look, now let's go ahead and create our destination. So I'm going to add a new destination here. I'm going to go down and select Google SecOps. Give it a name. We'll just call it Webinar SecOps. I've been getting really creative with all these names today. And we're going to stick with the standard gRPC protocol simply because it's the quickest to set up for a demo. There are some reasons why you may end up wanting or needing to use the HTTPS DataPlane API. But again, for this demo, the easiest and quickest option to get up and running is the gRPC. Fewer permissions that need to be granted. We're going to leave the endpoint alone because that is our endpoint. For authentication, we're going to select JSON, and I'm going to show you exactly where we're going to get those JSON credentials. And then the other value that we're going to need to fill in is our customer ID. So let's hop over to SecOps, and we're going to go to our settings. So right here is where we're going to get our customer ID. So that's easy enough under our profile. Let's go ahead and copy that and paste it over here. And for our settings, or excuse me, for our authentication, we're going to go down to our collection agents. And we're going to download this ingestion authentication file. So let's download that. Now, I'm not going to open that up on the screen, but I'll show you roughly what it's going to look like. So let's open up a sanitized version. So basically, we're going to copy and paste this entire JSON object and paste it into that field. So again, this is what it should look like, some version of this. I'm going to drop this guy down. I'm going to come over off screen and copy our real one. Back over to Bindplane, go into our credentials, paste that in. And let's just take a quick look at some of the other fields that we have. At this point, we're set to go. If I hit save, this would be up and running. But just to call out some of the other fields that we could enable. We've got a fallback log type. So again, as I mentioned earlier, the log type is really the most important attribute that we can add. We've already made sure to add the win EVT log, so we're good there. We can actually leave this blank, but if there was a general purpose log type that we wanted to set, we could do that. We also are going to leave the default value here for sending a single field. Right, so as we talked about, all of our data, our Windows event XML data, is one message in the body of our log. So that's exactly what we want to send over to SecOps. So we're going to send a single field, and we're going to send to the body. There are other ways that this can be configured, but in my experience, 9 times out of 10, this is the default and what we see most folks using. Let me drop down the advanced. Again, if there were ingestion labels that are applied to all of the data going to SecOps, we could add those here as well. Same with the namespace. We're already doing that with our standardization processor, so we're good to leave those alone. We're going to continue to compress the data. We'll leave our default timeout. We're going to leave the default batch limits as well. Again, if as you're digging into this, your limits might vary from the default, so that's certainly available to reset those. And the last thing I want to call out is the options. Again, all of these are on by default, but we want to make it clear if at any point the collector cannot reach out to SecOps, a couple things are going to happen. One, it is going to retry. So we can set the retry interval, the max number of attempts that it makes. And it's also going to have a persistent queue on the collector. Meaning, if any of that data isn't able to make it to SecOps, it's going to actually be stored on disk on the collector. So if anything happened to that collector for any reason, that data is not going to be lost. So again, we enable all of these values by default, but it's good to know that they're there. It's good to know that the collector is persisting this data and taking the correct procedures in case of any kind of downstream outage. So we'll leave all those alone. I think we're good. We've got our authentication. We've got our customer ID. We're going to save. Excellent. And now you can see we added the destination, but it's not connected to anything. Again, this is a new feature in the V2 configuration. So what I'm going to do is come over here, and I'm going to actually connect our Windows events up to our SecOps destination. And I'm just going to go ahead and disconnect the connection to DevNull. It's not really required, but there's no point in having that pipeline if it's not going to do anything. So let's disconnect. And we've got one final change that we want to make before we send all of this through, and that is to add a batch processor. This is not a requirement, but it's definitely a best practice. So apologies if I'm going a little quick. I'm going to go, let me get some more logs flowing. I'm going to go back into our destination side processor here. And I'm going to add a processor, and I'm going to select batch. And I'm just going to stick with the defaults, right? Batch size, a little over 8,000, timeout, 200 milliseconds. These are really standard. There may be times where we need to tweak these for a particular situation, but for right now, for this demo, the defaults are perfect. Let's hit save. And let's go ahead and start this rollout. So let's mark this time. Right now, we can officially say we have a fully functioning, and I'll prove it here in a second by going over to SecOps, but we've got everything in place. We've got our agent installed on our Windows server. We're pulling Windows events. We are setting the appropriate attributes, the log type, the namespace, the ingestion label, and we're batching that up and we're shipping it off to Google SecOps. This is a great time to pause. Ryan, Adnan, how are we doing on the questions?
Yeah, we have a ton of really cool questions that we can answer live as well.
Okay.
So the demo itself, do we have anything else that you think was cool to share?
Yeah, let's head over to SecOps here. Let's actually make sure that the data is indeed flowing. So I'm going to jump over to our search here. There's a couple different ways. Again, I am certainly no SecOps expert, but there are a couple different ways that we could search for this data. Some of you may be more familiar with performing a raw log search in using this interface. I was just shown this the other day. I'm going to actually do a raw log search from this from this UI. And I'm going to do that by searching for the computer name here. So let me see, what do we got here? There we go. Perfect. So this should be common in all of these logs to find the Win 2012 R2. So let's close this. Let's hop back over here. And we're going to do a raw search. And we're going to put in exactly the string we're going to look for. And let's just do the last 15 minutes for now, just to be safe. Hit apply and run search. And if everything goes well, we should see some logs pop up on here. Awesome. Just what we were looking for. So we can see, yep, we've got some new logs that just started literally 2 minutes ago. We can see those showing up in our list. We've got our namespace here, webinar that we did. There's our time, 11:36. Awesome. And we can see here, apologies if this is a little small. Let me drag that guy up a bit. And let's go down. So we can see that these logs were indeed parsed correctly. Because we put that log type in, we can see that, yep, SecOps knew exactly what to do with those logs and how to parse out those various fields that it cares about, right? Including things like the event ID, the product name, and so forth. Again, I'm not a SecOps expert per se. Just want to show, yep, the data is flowing. It is being parsed exactly as we would expect. And we're good to go.
Hey, Dan. We got a couple questions about the batch processor that you'd configured.
Sure.
Could you just speak a little bit to why that's useful?
Yeah, it's really
what the purpose of it is. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks. It really comes down to making those requests out to your destination as efficient as possible. So let me zoom in a bit and go back in here. And so, especially with streaming data like this, a lot of our various destinations will take the data sort of as it's received and send it off, which can end up adding a lot of unnecessary requests to those destinations. By explicitly adding a batch processor like we did, we can tell the pipeline, hey, batch up a certain number of these logs first, then send that as one request, which is ultimately going to be that much more efficient. And so again, there's some opportunity to sort of tweak these, to get sort of a little bit better efficiency around that. But again, the defaults really work pretty well in most cases. Hopefully that provides enough detail there. What else we got?
So I
see
think
you guys. typing away fevers.
We're trying hard to get everything
Yeah.
answered. I think one more that's super interesting is what could be the reason for unparsed logs? So it basically says sending logs to SecOps by following the same approach, but still if it's coming in unparsed, what can be done via BindPlane? I assume you're meaning or you want to ask about how to use processors and how that works with BindPlane, and probably then to know a bit more about the benefits there.
Sure. Yeah. So it's a great question, and certainly something we work with customers all the time with. I think the key is trying to understand exactly what SecOps is expecting. And so each one of these various log types are an actual parser. Again, let me make these a little bit better. Each one of these has a parser built into SecOps. So it's expecting the data to be formatted in a very particular way, with depending on which format of the data it is, which fields are present. Honestly, even things like, spacing and so forth, or time and day formatting, date, timestamp formatting and so forth. So it really comes down to understanding the format that SecOps is expecting based on the log type. And then, working within BindPlane, typically to, in most cases, you're sort of not messing it up. Not, you're intentionally leaving the original data alone so that it can get into SecOps and be parsed. That said, all of the parsers, or certainly most of the parsers within SecOps, are customizable. This is something that I know our customers have worked with Google and other partners to do. So that there are times when, for whatever reason, the data coming in might simply not match up with an existing parser. And so these can be updated within SecOps. Again, this is not my area of expertise, but working with Google, working with any partners you might have, there is absolutely the possibility of tweaking these parsers again to make it work with the data, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think that's the, without getting into any specifics, I think that's the, one of the things that we've seen. And again, using BindPlane to make sure that, again, all of the data is in that body field, right? Unparsed. So we're not seeing, and let me show you what it looks like when I say unparsed. I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to actually route this guy back over. I'm going to delete this one. And I am going to uncheck raw logs. And we've got everything set up. Let me roll that out. Give it a sec. Perfect. Awesome. I've got some data flowing. Let's go in here. Okay, great. So I'm going to back that size up just a hair. Hopefully it's still legible. This is what parsed data looks like. So I unchecked the raw logs, and we can see the body now actually has separate fields, right? So it has actually parsed that XML data and broken it out into different fields, channel, computer, basically doing similar work to what the SecOps parser would be doing. There's your event ID, other event related things, attributes, level, message, and so forth. So this is exactly what we don't want to send to SecOps. So if we see this data being parsed, that's where we want to figure out a way to undo that. We see this in cases with things like Syslog data very often. So I don't have any Syslog data flowing, but I'll show you what I'm talking about. If I go into Syslog here as a new source, And we're going to leave these defaults alone. We're going to select our protocol. We're going to say we're listening on UDP. That's fine. Awesome. Now, if I come down here, this syslog source wants to parse the data by default. That is how it functions. And so, but it does let you select where to parse that data to, meaning where in that log message is it going to put those separate fields. It can either put it in the body, basically overwriting the original log message, or it can parse it into the attributes, right? And if you left this alone, right? So you set up syslog, you set up your IP, your port, and so forth, and you said, yep, parse it to the body, probably because you simply maybe didn't open the advanced field, that's fine. And we hit save. The data coming out of here, again, would look like this Windows event data. It would be parsed into separate syslog fields. And again, that's simply not what SecOps is expecting from the Bindplane collector. So instead, we could change this guy over to parse to attributes, which would leave the body alone. The body would continue to be the raw message. Or, and we often see folks doing this, we can actually switch over to UDP or TCP, which both of these sources will the default is to not parse the message at all. So if you were to select TCP instead of syslog, set your port, right? Maybe 5140 or whatever your port is. You've got your log type. We're going to leave no parsing whatsoever. And you can do TLS if you wanted. And we hit save. Now, the data coming out of this would be completely unparsed and more likely to be what SecOps is looking for.
So on this topic as well, we have had multiple questions asking about exactly what type of data gets sent to Bindplane. Basically, what's the scope of the data that Bindplane sees? Specifically, one question is, how does, so the snapshots in Bindplane for exactly what the collector is seeing, how does that work? So I think obviously we need to reiterate that the telemetry data itself is never sent to Bindplane, but it might be cool to also explain what is sent to Bindplane.
Sure. Yeah. So under normal operation, which I would say is basically anytime you're not in Bindplane, you're not editing a configuration and so forth. The data that we're capturing is really just the metrics about the agent, right, or the collector. So whenever we see like these let me switch over here. Whenever we see these values, like the amount of logs collected and so forth, those metrics, that telemetry, is being passed between the collector and the Bindplane service, the Bindplane management console, right? And in the situations where you're actually coming in and opening up the configuration and requesting a snapshot, right? So that's what essentially just happened. Is Bindplane is requesting a snapshot from the collector. That's when it takes that snapshot, in this case, 113 logs, and shows you a preview of what that data looks like. As soon as that data is never stored within Bindplane, it's gone as soon as you close the window. So we're never retaining any of that data. It is simply used again just for the sake of making it easier to understand how you're setting up the processors and your data pipeline. And to reiterate a point that Adnan made right at the beginning, if that still becomes a concern, And for your particular environment, you can have no data whatsoever leaving your environment. BindPlane offers a completely on-premise, self-hosted solution. Feature parity between the two, and so you are more than welcome to host BindPlane in your environment. If that becomes a concern.
Hey Denton, a couple other quick questions. Windows events are collected in XML format. Can you send them in JSON format?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure. So I know that this is the way that we know works, the configuration that we've made. It's interesting because when you look at the where did I go? Yeah. I know that within their log list, it does show that technically it can support receiving this data in a variety of different formats. I would say we know that this configuration works. We would need to work with Google to going right back to what we were saying earlier. We would need to work with Google to better understand exactly what formats their parser supports. And yep, it does list various formats. We would need to better understand exactly what those would look like. So. Yeah, great question. Like I said, what I know works is the going back in here, selecting our raw log, making sure that's what's coming through. And SecOps certainly knows how to parse that data.
Awesome. Do you want to keep hammering on questions, Den, or did you have more to demo? I want to make sure there's enough time for everything you were planning on getting through.
Let me show one more thing real quick.
Cool.
We've got tons that we could do. I did for anybody that's that maybe is familiar with all of this. Let's just show sort of a little bit of advanced functionality, just to round things out, and then we can hop over to some more questions. So, we've got a lot of different. We talked about this. I did not roll that out. Okay, let me get back in here. I reselected logs, or excuse me, raw logs. So that's perfect. We're going back to SecOps, and I'm going to roll this back out. Give it a sec. So I'm basically getting us back to the original pipeline. All of these other resources are not connected, so they're basically not doing anything. If I come back in here, perfect. And we're back to our raw XML data. This data is still usable, right? We can still work with this. And one of the ways that we can do that is actually by utilizing the OpenTelemetry transform language. This is also referred to as OTTL or OTTL. And one of the ways that we can do that, we're literally going all the way into the advanced level of processors at this point. But I think it's exciting to know the flexibility that there is within BindPlane, within the OpenTelemetry collector. So I'm going to go and create a custom processor. And I'm going to copy and paste this because there's no way I'm writing this live from scratch. It's not complicated, but you're always going to miss a parentheses or a quote somewhere. And what this is doing, this is a simple OTTL statement that says, I'm going to transform specifically log data, because we're working with log data as opposed to metrics or traces. And what I want to do is create a new attribute called event ID. And I'm going to use this handy XML function, get XML, that takes an XPath query. right? You can certainly Google XPath. It's ways to work with XML data. And essentially, it's going to look in the body, right? And it's going to find the instance of the event ID object. I'm not exactly sure what they're called in XML, but it's going to look through the XML and find the event ID, and it's going to pull out the value of that. So if I hit done and all goes well, I'm going to scroll down here. Perfect. We've got a new attribute that we can work with in our pipeline. This is not going to be sent to SecOps as a separate attribute. SecOps is already going to be able to parse that data from the body. But what this allows us to do, so let me save this. I'll go ahead and roll that out just for the heck of it. And if I wanted to come down here and say, okay, maybe I don't want to send every single event to SecOps. Maybe I've got a very specific list of event IDs, security related event IDs that I care about. I can create a filter by condition on logs. I want to include, and I'm going to provide a list of exactly which event IDs I care about. So what's my field? I'm looking for attributes. The field is event ID because I parsed that out. So I can now work with that field really easily. And I'm going to do about as simple of a regex that you can get. So I'm going to do matches. And because it's right there, I'm going to use 4716. And I'm going to hit done. And now we can actually see we've got all of these events that are actually going to be dropped in this case. And we're only going to send this one particular event over to SecOps. If I wanted other ones, maybe I also care about event ID 4950. Let's go in here. Let's add a pipe 4950. Hit done. Beautiful. Look at this, guys. Regex live on the webinar. It's never been done before. Now we've got our two events that we're sending off, and again, as opposed to sending all of the events. So we've worked with customers that have very specific event IDs that they care about. Again, they come from sources of that are specifically related to security. We can do that here with two quick processors, one custom to pull out the event ID and one to filter on those. And I'll roll that out.
And you just answered probably 10 or so questions that we did have, because
nice.
A bunch of them were about the event ID, and a bunch of them were about filter processors and the custom processor we're just explaining now. So yeah, it was it's as if you were reading minds, Denton. Way to go.
Fantastic. I love it. That's what we're here for. So yeah, and again, this is tip of the iceberg kind of stuff, guys. You saw how long the list of processors are. We've got tons of other functionality that we could be doing that just sort of gets you started.
Awesome, cool. And we're reaching the top of the hour. Yeah, we'll definitely look into the questions that we didn't end up answering. We'll do a little recap on our end and try answering them after the fact as well. But for now, I think we have to give Denton a break. He's been killing it for the last 45 minutes. So with that, I just want to do a last little shout out before.
Real quick, Adnan, before you jump over to that. I just want to say thanks everyone for all the questions. So we had over 70 questions we got answered. There are over 50 open. So we will try and rapid fire some of these, but if we didn't get to yours, please join our Slack community, reach out there. You'll have the whole team ready to jump in and support you, or send us an email. We definitely do want to get your questions answered. So apologies if we weren't able to get to it today.
Yeah, great. Yeah, very nice touch, Ryan. Thank you. Yeah, we'll definitely try our best to do a little compilation of questions and make sure to get that out. And yeah, for the end, stay tuned for future webinars and workshops. So we have a community call coming up in February, so February 12th. So tune in to get access to a bit to more demos. We'll definitely be doing more of these. And yeah, in February we have some more exciting announcements for you, and you'll probably be seeing both Denton, myself, and Ryan again. So with that, I think we're wrapping it up for today, and yeah, see you very soon.
Fantastic.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you. See you guys.